You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
All right. Sorry, you were saying.
Dr. Malik, it is really good to see you again. You have such a radiant face and beingness that just the camera captures and puts me immediately in a better place, even though I was sitting there with my beautiful wife and she was saying to me basically, honey, get yourself in a little better place. And my mind was here, my mind was there. And then I see you, and it's a pleasure to see you again. It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, it's the pleasure is all mine. Peter, I don't think I made it clear to you how much in awe I am of you. I don't have heroes, but you come pretty close. And I'll explain why, right? Basically, there's some people who are ahead of the curve. And by that, I mean, like, you know, it takes 5 years for other people to catch up. Sometimes maybe 10 years. In many respects, you are like over 25 years ahead of people, like the psychiatric world. And even now to this day, they haven't caught up. Like, that's how far ahead you have been. You called it out when the electroconvulsive therapy, you called it out with the overprescribing of the drugs and the medication, you called out the treatment of children with psychiatric illnesses. And then to put the cherry on the cake, my friend, 18 months into the pandemic, you wrote the book, COVID-19 and the Global Predators and We're the Prey. The book's somewhere behind me on the bookshelf. I mean, that was only 18 months into the pandemic, and you wrote the book and you laid it all out. Who is involved, the actors, how it goes back 10 years, and everything. You know, how they planned warp speed 10 years in advance, why they distributed the mRNA and DNA vaccines, even though they killed all the lab animals, you know, everything. You know, I'm just, dude, you've always been on the dot, and I'm just saying thank you. Thank you for all the work you've done.
Well, thank you. I think that's about the loveliest introduction I've ever had. And somehow you just captured sort of where I've been. And it's not even something I understand. You know, I sometimes, well, even recently with the new ideas I've been working on, and I think, why me? And I really don't know why me. And it feels like God had some plan in mind for me and then for Ginger.
Mm.
It really feels like that. I'm actually sort of unable to respond any further because what you said is actually the reality, but I don't say that about myself. I would never imagine saying that about myself.
Well, let me say it for you then. Let me say it for you. You know, now, honestly, you've written so many books like Toxic Psychiatry, Talking Back to Prozac, Talking Back to Ritalin, Brain Disabling Treatments in Psychiatry. I mean, you've been a prolific writer, and essentially you're an advocate for patients, and you're trying to protect them from the psychiatric world. I've got a friend who's a consultant psychiatrist in this country, and she's really tortured. She goes, I sit in these meetings and they're all brain dead. They don't know what it really means to be mentally healthy. And all they can do is prescribe the latest drug. And when something goes wrong and there's an adverse event, they go, oh, well, I guess that patient got psychosis. Well, we got the wrong dose or whatever. And she goes, I just feel that I'm practicing a form of barbaric medicine. I don't want to be a psychiatrist anymore. I don't know what I'm doing in this field. And that takes a lot for someone to do, to call out the problems within their own tribe. You know, whether it's Pakistanis, calling out the Pakistani grooming gangs in the UK, whether it's Israelis calling out what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza, whatever it is, like whether it's doctors calling out the COVID shots, people have a habit of not calling out their own tribe. But you did, and I bet you that made you unpopular. What did it feel like being a psychiatric MD and criticizing your whole field and discipline? Did you get like reprimanded? Did you suffer in any way, or were you shielded?
Imagine your most extreme movie about the whistleblower, and it was probably more difficult at times than that movie. Um, it was very odd for me because I knew the profession was well, I'll tell you very briefly again about the very start because that that was very key. Um, I was at Harvard in my freshman year, and I was in a special honors program for American history and literature. I was going to be a professor, probably. That was my goal. Possibly a lawyer. Medicine, I did not imagine. But I was deeply interested in psychology. But all of my studying of psychology was basically probably still as a young man about myself, trying to understand myself. I hadn't really looked at it as something to spend time doing for the world so much. And I started reading a lot on my own, even in the very beginning. Who have you got in your lap?
Oh, it's my cat. She loves
It's
me.
a big girl.
Actually, she's quite small. She's
Oh, is
tiny.
she small? Oh, she's not so big. Just coming across the screen. We have a Yorkie that, when Ginger and I do our radio show together, is usually in Ginger's lap. So I'm very familiar with this phenomena of
And the thing is, if the door's open to the studio because it's 30 degrees Celsius, and if I shut it, it becomes a sauna. And worse, she just whines and meows at the door. So
yeah,
I've just got used to letting her come and go. And
yes.
she loves her dad. So she's got a twin sister who loves her mum, but this one
Good.
loves me. So we're balanced out.
Well, I'm alone. The Yorkie just adores Ginger. And for the first time, really, we don't have two animals. We have one. But I was planning a fairly conventional career, more or less conventional career. But I knew I was an independent thinker, and I was very disappointed when I got to Harvard because actually the students there were not as inquiring as the community I came from. I came from an extraordinary community of the first generation born in America, young Jewish boys and girls. People had moved out of Manhattan and out of Queens and out of Brooklyn and Jersey and come to the South Shore of Long Island. And many of our parents were first generation, but many were actually older generation. And this was a group that was so full of life and um, inquiry and thinking. And I've never been in such a group before. Or since really, until I got into the Christian group that I'm in now. I'm Jewish. The Christian group, just Christian, which is kind of what I feel is the core of the caring people in health and medicine today in the United States. We think of ourselves, I guess, as the health freedom movement. We have different names for it. And that's been under incredible undermining and destruction. It's amazing how the evil opposition works. So I was very active. I had a lot of friends. I was president of the class more often than not, literally. I was somewhat of an athlete. editor of the newspaper. I mean, that's how I got into Harvard, from this little school. And my best friend got in too. Everybody, we all many going to Ivy League schools the first time in the class. It was this new phenomenon of the nouveau riche Jewish community. And as I think about it right now, I realize how we never talked about the Holocaust. We were growing up during the Holocaust. So I graduated in 54 from high school. So the Holocaust, the full awareness that would get down to the kids was at the end of the war, toward 44, 45. And I don't remember ever discussing it with anybody. But I witnessed the Holocaust on Movie Tone News when I was 9, perhaps 10 years old. I haven't been able to locate when that film exactly was, when it came out. And I'm sitting, we're waiting for a Disney movie or something to start, a family movie. I don't know where my older brother was. He's 4 years older, but I do remember being with my mother and father. And all of a sudden, Moving Tone News starts showing the liberation of one of the concentration camps, extermination camps. And they're showing the villagers through it. It's almost like a punishment for the villagers. And there's Jews hanging on the wires, and there's Jews in heaps. And I'm watching this, and I've never heard of this before. And I try to hide behind a chair, and my father says, no, he should look. He never talked to me about it. No, he should look. And that changed something inside me at that moment. It was like, I have to be prepared, or this will not happen to me, or something happened later, not long after. I mean, I remember when I first fell in love, at 15, I started thinking, what if they came? And Judy. It was very profound. And then my uncle came back from the war, and he was one of the liberators. Uncle, I won't tell you his last name, but Dutch. He liked to call himself Dutch. And then after, I think it was a Jewish fighter, very unusual. And Dutch was from outside the family and very different from the extended family. And he was not a nice man. A great veneer. And he took out of his wallet photos he took of the torture chamber at one of these places. Vivid photos. And I again remember a kind of a weird thing. What is this? What do I do with this? And it just sort of stayed with me. I'm sure it covered the way I thought about the world, but I'm not sure how much until I got to my first freshman year of Harvard. And I'd been started reading psychology books. I was always some kind of depressed, but always, I look back at them in 6th grade, and I've got this big smile on my face. I was always there with a smile and always relating to people. But inside there was, the deep sadness, and that some of the girls in the group knew that I felt. In our group, maybe 10, 20 people, whatever, to define it differently. And a friend of mine came up to me and said, hey, Peter, you're always studying. You need to get out. My brother started a volunteer program at the state hospital a couple of years ago. He was graduating Harvard soon. And he said, come on out and we'll volunteer at the state hospital. I didn't know anything about state hospitals. I didn't know about their role in Nazi Germany. I didn't know about their role as a background for the development of the Holocaust. I wouldn't know about that until after my psychiatric training. And we went out, and it's this big old place. It's on a hill. He has somehow been working with his brother and starting this Harvard volunteer program in the violent wards, particularly the female violent wards. And I go into this dungeon. It's cement wards, big iron or steel doors that clang with big keys. It's a stereotype of the snake pit. And this is helpful to me because I really trust talking with you. I mean, here I am. I'm going to be a lawyer or a professor, maybe at Harvard. I've got my mind is personally into psychology. I stand in the bookstore and I often don't go to class. If you got grades back then, you didn't even have to go to class. And I would read books, couldn't afford them, and I'd read them and put them back and think about psychology and why was I sad. And I walk into this place and I see these people in such wretched condition. There are people, nobody looks but half alive. There's no staff anywhere. The staff I've paid, except have let us in with keys. Later, I would become a director program. I take my own keys. So I had keys to this monster for a couple of years. And one of the aides says, as if to make some marvelous point, smug point, that's an ex-Radcliffe student. It's the Harvard Radcliffe Mental Hospital program. And she's lying on the ground. And my first thought was, I could be here. If I didn't work so hard, or if I didn't try so hard, or basically it was there, but for the grace of God, go on. It wasn't, for some reason, it wasn't, it was, oh my God, what are they doing? What are they doing? And that very first day, the volunteers, when we went in, it was like angels coming into the patients. I actually was in the heart of the violent psychiatric world before the drugs came in. It was just before the heavy drugs snowed everybody under. And I was never threatened. I was threatened on the streets of Cambridge by the townies. Never. It was always hello. And people getting some energy, putting notes in my pocket to take to their family, which I didn't or couldn't do, or they probably didn't have addresses on them. But people actually in the women's ward asking what could they do for me for coming, and literally embarrassed, awkwardly, they would beg me to shine my shoes. I haven't told that story on TV. They just wanted to do anything, polish my watch. I mean, it was whatever they could think of. And this is amid chaos. Maybe down at the end of the ward, somebody's getting hit in the head by another patient. Somebody else is peeing on the floor because they've been lobotomized. Wow. These were all victims of lobotomy and victims of ECT. I would find out some of these people would have had 100 ECT. They were getting insulin coma treatment. You as a doctor would just know better than most. Overdoses of insulin until they came close to death, and some would die in this ridiculous thing. But as they got deeper into the coma from the insulin and they're having seizures in the coma, they'd be given maybe sips of orange juice was enough to start bringing them back. In an emergency, I think they would give them an injection of sugar because the insulin was wiping out the food for the brain. And some of it was crazy that the people would say to me. The scariest thing I ever experienced was on the men's board. I'm 5'4" tall. Ginger says I'm 6 feet, but she's definitely mistaken. And I've learned to stand tall. I stand tall. And this very large man comes up to me nobody around. I'm walking, he's walking, large patient. He looks at me, and he says, I smoke Lucky Strike. And he keeps on going. And that's my scariest memory of a confrontation with somebody. And I remember years later, I would give talks occasionally. I don't get much into the establishment much at any time, except as a critic, but I would lecture ER docs on what do you do when somebody is violent? Oh, okay, you give them Haldor, you call for help, and all these others say, no, 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 no. You get nonviolent, totally nonviolent. That's what you do. You don't think of hurting the other person. That's not where you go. You go to, I'm harmless. And I knew that in the hospital. But on the streets, if you so much as were a townie and bumped into me, I might get in a fight with you. I didn't even think of that before. I never thought of it before today. This difference between the young man in the hospital, because I never let anybody pick on me. I did not permit, unless I thought I was going to get killed in some strange place. I probably still would never let anybody pick on me. And here, that same year, I realized how crazy it was to have an idea nobody picks on me. Because I had done something so stupid that I realized I had to change. So here's me on the outs. What I did that was so stupid is I'm walking along, there's nobody around. Car of Townie comes down one of the streets in Cambridge, and they start cursing at me, fucking Harvard student or whatever they were saying. I don't know. I walk out to the car. That was me. That's kind of dumb. And I think one of them said he must be crazy or something, and they drove off. Later, I told Ginger these stories, and she would say God was protecting you. I never had any ideas like that.
So, Peter, can I just say something? You know, when you describe that mental institution and the gates and the concrete slabs and everything, the people with lobotomies, is it really like it's portrayed in the movies and the pictures, you know, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and whatnot? These people in just hospital gowns, rocking backwards and forwards, banging their heads.
There were things like that. One of the first things that I saw that just I could not believe was a man was sitting on a chair. Any chairs were too heavy to throw, just like in those movies. They were heavy. They looked like heavy outdoor chairs might look today, but twice as heavy. Many times more heavy because a big man couldn't easily pick them up. And I'm sitting there watching it. There's nobody on the ward but me. And another patient marches over and smacks him with all their might in the chin and then keeps walking and goes and sits down. I'm looking at this. What do I do with this? And totally unlike how I would have behaved on the street, I said nothing. I do nothing about this. Maybe I tried to talk to the guy who got hit. I don't respond with threat. And that must have just had a profound impact on me, much greater than I realized until this moment, because I'm thinking of that contrast of what I would do if somebody bumped me on the street in those days. And so there was some fight that got built up in me in my childhood, some real toughness. Some of it had to do with the Holocaust, I think, and anti-Semitism. I didn't experience much, but very little, but I remember very few things.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, these little things can make a profound change
Yeah,
to you, especially when you're young. And if you're 5'4", I'm 5'7". Yeah, you kind of have to stand up for yourself. Otherwise, you get pushed around by the bigger boys.
yes, no, absolutely. And
I was called Scrappy, by the way, by my consultant surgeons when I was a junior doctor. And, you know, Scrappy Doo, you know, Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo. Scrappy's a small
yeah,
little.
yeah,
Because they were like, and I was like, why'd you call me this? They went, well, you're small and you're a fighter. Like, you're always like, let me at him.
that's interesting. And you're such a soft man and sweet man. And
Well, that's what I thought.
I think that we protected our dignity enough when we were young. This is so interesting. I could protected our dignity enough that we could let ourselves love, let ourselves care. Or maybe I think that you have to really love. You have to feel safe. You have to be on some level. You feel safe, and you know if you're a person who is going to maintain their dignity, it's a kind of safety in that
Yeah.
most people do not have. I mean, I was alone as a young Jewish boy in particular. I was alone in the way I handled those things, and I would defend my friends. But I rarely had to fight because there was a look about me that may have either looked so fierce or so bewilderingly nutty or something. But I was never like, I never would look crazy. I mean, I looked like, I don't think you want to do this.
Do you know what? It's really funny. It's a similar story to me because, like, I'm 50 in a week, and
Hmm.
I think I've had one fight as a kid. I must have been
Mm.
about 9, and that was me defending another kid that was being
Kid, yeah.
bullied. And so I never, no one actually directly ever fought with me or wanted to fight with me.
Oh,
And I
yeah.
never wanted to fight with anyone else. And I had a bit of racism. Some people call me Packy once or a nigger once. I mean, that's far off. I even got called a chinky, which is really far off. So, I've been called all kinds of things. But on the whole
Not
grammar,
sweet guy, huh?
yeah, but on the grand scheme of things, these were very small, isolated incidents. But
Yeah,
you can't remember it. Go, well, that was interesting.
yeah,
But on the whole, I had a very positive upbringing in
yeah.
Scotland. But as a young little boy who's smaller than everyone else, and sometimes you get called a few names, you kind of feel like you need to stand up for yourself. So I don't know what it was about me, but yeah, people didn't fight me either. I
Yeah,
don't know
well, they
what.
could tell that. I did get in fights.
Oh,
And,
really?
oh, God, yeah. And I think that that was because, first of all, I was a big mark. I was like so popular. I didn't think so. I mean, it's not how I viewed myself, but I had friends. I was a track star for a while till I didn't grow anymore. Um, that's how I played football. I was had the enormous first and second, third strides. Um, but I did get in fights, and I made it impossible for them to ever want to fight me again. Um,
Sounds like you're a scrappy dude as well. So let's talk about this lobotomy things. I mean,
we're
you're,
going from what we're going big and little here.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah, let's do it. I mean, but you're kind of like in the midst of that era when they were doing lobotomies on hospital wards. That guy, Moniz, he was the one that popularized it. Antonio Moniz. I think he even won a Nobel Prize in
He
1949.
he got the Nobel Prize, and interesting in '49. And what he did, he was a Portuguese.
Yeah.
And Walter Freeman was the man who took over and did it in the U.S. starting in the 50s. And the news goes back to 36, pre-shock treatment. Shock treatment's 38. So they took a while to give him the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, he, based on the Nuremberg Code, should have been hung.
Yeah.
And the Nuremberg Code was already out. Nuremberg codes, I think, what is it, 47, 46, it's in that area. It's a couple of years afterward. So despite the Nuremberg Code, which says that you cannot do uh, harmful experiment, let alone horrendous, awful, destructive, ungodly mutilation of the frontal lobes of people with lobotomy, you can't do that even with permission in a total institution of which the state mental hospital is. So I've actually successfully in court applied the Nuremberg Code to lobotomy and to the fact that first of all nobody would consent to it in their right mind, but the other being that you're in these total institutions when they do it to you. You really don't have freedom when it's usually been done to you. Um,
Hi, everybody. Sorry for the interruption. I don't know why I'm saying sorry. It's my podcast, and I need to advertise my consultation service. As you know, folks, I don't have any sponsors. How many big podcasts do you know of that don't have any sponsors? I'm supported by you, the tiny percentage who subscribe to my Substack or my Spotify paid channel. So to those few of you, I just want to say thank you so much. I love you. And hopefully the ones of you who are listening for free, you're still helping by rating the show 5 stars and spreading it on your social media far and wide, whether it's on Facebook, Instagram, your WhatsApp groups or whatever. Please introduce them to my podcast. Hopefully some of them will subscribe to my channel. But I also want to take this opportunity to talk about my one-to-one consultation service I'm offering. Now, I'm not acting as your doctor or diagnosing and treating you, in which case some of you might be thinking, well, what the heck are you doing? What kind of consultation is this? Folks, if only you knew, I'm about advocating for your healthcare needs. I'm about educating you, empowering you, helping you navigate the minefield that's the sick care system. I'm helping you ask the right questions from your doctor, to get the best out of your consultation, to answer your unanswered questions, and to give you a second opinion, and so much more. I can prepare you for surgery. I can give you alternative views on different treatments. I can introduce you to other healthcare practitioners. But listen, enough of what I'm saying. Let's look at 2 reviews from today. There's Matt. I've learned so much from Doc Malik by listening to his podcast interviews. I felt he could help me with my personal health and well-being during a stressful time in my life, and he didn't disappoint. He offered me some great advice concerning a wide range of things, including diet, lifestyle, sleep, physical activity, and trauma, and he also guided me to other sources of help. He is a fountain of wisdom with a massive heart and has stepped up to help people properly in the way that your typical doctor does not. Thank you, Doc. Well, no, thank you, Matt, for a lovely review. And then secondly, Eloise. Not only does this man have what appears to me an incredible depth and breadth of true knowledge, he has the biggest heart. I felt so genuinely cared for around sensitive health issues that I may not ordinarily wish to speak about. A consultation is a trusted, safe space which was essential for me as I've tried everything under the sun and I'm aware of my own blocks. This straight-talking, caring approach ensures you leave the consultation with a no-nonsense, clear plan on what's important to change, how to go about it, and recommendations of other specialists in the field where Doc Malik believes you would benefit from. He is considerate of costs, so offers multiple ways to go about protocols to get the best for you without spending a fortune unnecessarily. The mental relief I got from this consultation was, in fact, priceless. So there you go, folks. Don't take it from me. If this resonates with you, check out my website, docmalik.com/consultations. Have a look. And if you think that, there's a calling there, book a consultation with me. Right, folks. Back to the show. Thank you for taking time to listen. I love you loads. So much. And honestly, for the recent listeners who've left Apple reviews and 5-star ratings on Spotify, I see you. I see what you've done, and I'm very grateful. Thank you, folks. God bless. Bye-bye. So what was it? When you went into psychiatry, it must have been what? The 60s. Am I right?
Well, I'm doing psychiatry, first of all, in 54 in the hospital. I mean, don't forget that. Well, you wouldn't actually know. I actually set up a Case 8 program against the initial wishes of the superintendent of about 12 students, in which we got the social worker to supervise us once a week, and we each worked with our own assigned patient. It was revolutionary. And out of it came a book. It was the book, the title of the book, Doing a Book, was all my idea back then. College students in a mental hospital. And I wrote a draft from my heart. But I began to learn about censorship very early because we did have a psychiatric supervisor, a professor at Harvard, and he took my manuscript, which he'd already gotten a publisher for, so he felt he owned it, I guess, and completely gutted almost everything about love and almost everything about how horrible the hospital was. And almost everything about that, what really heals is your spirit, you know. But I was deeply enmeshed in psychiatry then. I was going and lecturing at conferences. Psychiatry then had several wings it doesn't have anymore. Psychiatry had a kind of a social wing, which I would now see as early communism infiltration, probably, but it was a socialist community wing. It had a psychoanalytic wing. 10% of psychiatrists in those days were getting some psychoanalytic exposure. And many, not many, a number of psychiatrists whom I knew were treating people and trying to do it without drugs. There's nothing like that anymore. So in those days, I could find a mentor here or there who would sit with me, and we would just talk in depth about what we saw around us. But most of my learning was just coming out of looking at myself, looking at the other people, and seeing myself being tortured. And I knew I didn't like it. So I'm sure they didn't like it when I imagined what they were feeling.
Yeah.
But there was a very strong movement in a place called State University of New York, Upstate Medical Center. It just happened to be the place that Thomas Szasz ended up as a professor. And Szasz was a psychoanalyst, and he did not believe he was treating illness. And he wrote a book called The Myth of Mental Illness. It was an incredibly radical book, and it was a 100% libertarian book. It totally lacked love, which I didn't realize in the beginning, because I already thought that really what I was helping people with was really caring about them in the hospitals, the state hospitals. I didn't yet know that that was going to be the same thing with the walking wounded and more normal people. I probably thought maybe that was for psychosis, that's what they, but I didn't know. I hadn't admitted yet maybe everybody needed that, including myself. But Szasz, he wrote The Myth of Mental Illness, and his department had several enlightened people in it. And when I learned about it, I was applying to, internships at the big hospitals. But I saw his book, and they had already picked their only 2 residents for an internship. It was really an internship. But I met Szasz, and they let the other guy go, invited me to come, and I canceled all my other applications. And I worked with him. I mean, I had lunch with him and things like that. And the way we grew apart is that I became convinced that therapy wasn't about libertarian strategies. It ultimately was about a human relationship. There were a lot of psychologists who, like Carl Rogers, who already knew that, but the psychiatrists didn't know that. Thomas Szasz didn't know that. But it gave me an opportunity to, as an intern, I was already giving grand rounds and things from my experience of 4 years in the state hospital. So I thought I could really have an impact. I actually thought, well, I think, and of course I have, but I meant a real impact of helping transform psychiatry. I have not transformed psychiatry one bit. I may have made them a little afraid of things, but I haven't transformed. It's untransformable. So I had a sense that I really was going to have an effect. But I quickly learned, I went from Syracuse. I took my first year of residency back at Harvard because I wanted to go to the great place, but I really had loved my internship where I had 6 months on psychiatry. And Harvard was just then like what you were describing your friend experienced. Because Harvard overnight literally had transformed from being primarily psychoanalytic, and I'm not selling psychoanalysis, it's a cult, but it was primarily psychoanalytic and even family therapy oriented the year I went for my interview. The next year, it had completely changed into drugs. The transformation had nothing to do with truth. It had to do that psychiatry was being at Harvard. This was the most famous institution at Harvard for psychiatry. Massachusetts Mental Health Center, it's called now. It was then, used to be Boston Psychopathic. It was the acute treatment center for the state, which was run by Harvard.
Is this the 1970s?
No, it was I was at Harvard 62, 63.
Okay. Wow, that early. Okay.
63, 64. I graduated med school in 62, so I left Syracuse. I went to Syracuse, had this amazing thing in upstate New York with this libertarian psychiatrist, came back to Harvard. Harvard was so awful, it was unbelievable. The students to get to Harvard, I got to Harvard, I had reasonable grades, but that wouldn't have got me there. I got to Harvard because my work had been written up in places, professional places. Our work in the volunteer program in particular, because it wasn't just me. There were other people who led it before me, and there were people who led it after me. They were dullards when it came to other human beings. They had to all have had A's in not just the regular pre-med, but probably in much more than that to get into the Harvard program. If they'd gone to Harvard Medical School, they barely had time for anything else but science and medicine in college. My college was entirely different. I got in because of who I was, literally, into the program. And it was like being, I think now it would be like being maybe going to communist Russia at the height of the power. The think was totally materialistic. And there was no self-insight. It was very different in upstate New York. In upstate New York, there were other residents other than me. They weren't necessarily intellectuals at all, but they were guys and people. They had children, some of them, they were grown men. They hunted, they fished, they liked the outdoors. They had a general conservative respect for other human beings. It was upstate New York, was a conservative area. Harvard, these youngsters knew nothing about anything. And at one point, I said, look, we just had a suicide on the ward. Actually, it was a guy just after he left the ward. He killed himself. But it started in the ward, the suicidal behavior. They put him in a hospital, another hospital, and he killed himself. And I raised the issue. Look, I said, I just spent 6 months on a wholly different ward system at Syracuse. I said, we didn't have locked wards. And see, there was stuff I could work with then. We didn't have locked wards. We thought a lot about our own effect on the patients. The nurses and the docs got along almost like a family in a sense. I said, this is a very tense, uptight ward. We have to look at ourselves and what influence. I didn't say that stupid resident did. I said, what influence we had on it. And interestingly enough, maybe I felt empowered because the little conference we were in was being visited by the director, and the director was a former commissioner of mental health and a psychoanalyst, and I did know he knew a little something about something. Well, they wanted to kill me. It was like, who do you think you are? Whoa, I didn't know this is what it was going to be like.
Well, this problem has got a lot worse because I say it doesn't matter. It's not just Harvard now. Anywhere.
Everywhere now.
Everywhere. The medics. The problem is they're highly educated, but they're also highly indoctrinated.
Yeah.
And they're also highly ignorant, and they're also highly arrogant. You know, it's not a good combination. Not good.
This was when I was there. Was the beginning of all the excitement around the women's movement and empowering women. Ginger later convinced me there's a lot of flaws with feminism. But at the time, I was like looking at all that, and I was on the left. I was progressive. I would say I thought I was on the left. I thought I was on the left. And I don't think at the time I probably would have said I believed in God. Um, but the environment, these people never read a feminist book. Feminism was the new understanding of the abuse of women. They never would have read a book like that. They wouldn't have read a psychology book. They never read Carl Rogers. I remember Carl Rogers was the most famous American therapist at the time. And he wrote books about improving the self-esteem of his patients. I was reading this kind of stuff. I brought up Carl Rogers in one of these little meetings, and I was told by the senior doctor, who happened to be there too, maybe the same guy. Yeah, I was shocked. He said, we don't discuss psychologists here. We only are interested in what psychiatrists have to say. It's like I'm sitting there and it's like, where am I?
So just for people who don't know, I mean, normally the difference between a psychologist and a psychiatrist is like cardiologist and cardiothoracic surgeon. And the psychologists talk about the mind and help people with talking therapies and all that
The
kind of
good
stuff.
ones, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the psychiatrists, well, nowadays anyway, they just want to give you a pill for every ill.
That's all they've ever wanted to do. The psychoanalytical influence on psychiatry was maybe 5 years long, and it was brought about by Rockefeller and other foundations, and somehow thinking, I don't know why. I mean, these are such corrupt people. That was maybe because psychoanalysis is crazy too, with its sex emphasis and everything. So there was this influence from the big money that briefly, God, that's what it was. I don't know that I realized that before. Because, the big foundations, they were always trying to turn life into sex and into, they funded the Penthouse and the magazines and Hugh Hefner and they funded that awful man who wrote the books in the 50s about how we're all sexual libertines and we should have sex with anything we want. I mean, I know his name well, but I'm skipping on him right now. He wrote the female sexuality and then male sexuality.
Well, I also agree. I also agree with Ginger when she says feminism isn't now a good thing. I mean, it might have been initially. I mean,
initially, I think it was incredibly liberating. But
yeah, who doesn't argue that women should have equal rights, equal pay, equal opportunities? Absolutely. But they sold that promise, but then what they did make women is just slaves in a different form. Wage slaves, slaves to the boss, slaves to tax, disconnected them from their children, made them, fight against man fight against women, make them sexual objects, use them objects to be abused and used without any respect. I just feel like they went too far, to be
Well,
honest.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But for me, it was Ginger. I was so into the victim and standing up for the victim and all that, which essentially comes from more of a left view than from conservatism or libertarianism. But it was Ginger who said to me, no, this is wrong. I gave her a whole host of feminist books when we first got together 40 years ago, 42 years ago. We got married on July 4th. So we just had an anniversary recently.
Happy anniversary.
Yes, purposely on July 4th, so we could celebrate both freedom and our marriage and have fireworks.
I love it. Well, our anniversary is in a few days' time, so we're also in July. Yeah.
How long have you been married?
Not very long, 11 years.
11,
so I had a starter wife, and my wife had a starter husband, and we were both married in our own little cults. We both left our cults, we both got divorced, and then we randomly bumped into each other, and the rest is history. So there you go.
Well, we outdid you. We were both married twice.
Oh, God. Oh, okay.
So much for your embarrassment.
So how long have you been married then with Ginger?
42 years.
Oh, lovely. Lovely. That's wow. It's amazing.
Ginger is Ginger ended the sad boy.
That's
She took the
nice.
sad boy away. I've never said that to her in those words. Can't wait to tell her that. That's what she did. I've
That's
talked to her
beautiful.
a lot about her ending being depressed and so on, but she really scooped up the sad boy and said, God loves you and I love you.
Oh,
That's
that's
what she
beautiful.
did.
That's beautiful. You know what? I'm gonna confess with you now. For the longest time, I didn't love myself, and I've looked into it. I'm not going to repeat it because my listeners know, but my mum and dad used to fight like cats and dogs. And as a little kid, I remember looking down at them fighting, screaming, being scared in bed, lonely. And, I was a different kid from all the other kids. We were poor. We were struggling. There was a lot of drama in our house. And I just felt unloved. I was also abandoned when I was 1 month old and left with my mum's relatives for a year. So I didn't have the bonding that a child normally has with his parents. And for all that time, that's why I feel I never felt close to my parents. I felt odd. I felt different.
This is so,
And I just didn't.
I'm smiling because you're describing me. Go ahead.
Oh, wow. So I didn't love myself for the longest time. I ended up getting into this marriage. It was an introduction, semi-arranged. And I just didn't think I was good enough to ever be loved. And this person was quite abusive to me, physical and mental, and it was just not easy. But I thought, I had to help this person, and I thought this was my God was trying to do something. I thought this was the best I could ever get. And yeah, I just struggled. I struggled to find happiness. I didn't want to be on my own. I always wanted to be with crowds and groups and run away to other things and do things and occupy myself. What I hated was being on my own and just reflecting in my own thoughts, because that would make me realize how much I didn't love myself and how lonely I was. So I would just immerse myself in experiences and sounds and tastes and all that kind of stuff. And then I don't know what happened. I think I just got tired. I was hitting almost 40 and I was just tired of chasing something and, wanting to be loved. And I just started just loving myself and just
Mm.
wanting to be happy on my own. And I said I'd rather be happy on my own than be with someone and unhappy. And it was only like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months in that state. And then I bumped into my wife. But she had her own issues. I still had my own issues. But through our marriage, we've kind of healed ourselves. And we look back now and we're so much mentally healthier and resilient. I don't ever feel depressed. I mean, even though I lost my career 2 years ago and I started speaking out with COVID and I lost my income, I didn't really get depressed. I got a bit sad for a month. Then I just picked myself back up again and thought, no, I'm going to make something of it. Um, so yeah, one of the things I also want to say to you was I recently, well, last November took magic mushrooms, psilocybin, first time in my life. I've never drunk alcohol, never smoked, never taken any drugs, but I had this calling and a friend invited me to a retreat and I took a large dose of magic mushrooms and I went on a 7 hour trip and I met my younger self and I hugged him. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. I could sense the loneliness in my younger self. He was so sad. He felt so unloved. And this voice was saying in my head, why do you love your children so much? And I was like, because they're my children. I love them. I've got a 6-year-old boy, an 8-year-old girl, and a 10-year-old girl. And this voice went, are you sure? But why do you love your children? Why do you sleep with your son every night and hold him tight? And I was like, because they're my children. Don't people love their children? And then suddenly I was in this dark room with a cone of light, and there's a little boy curled up, weeping and crying and sobbing. And the loneliness was so painful. And I was like, who is this? Who are you showing me? And as I walked closer and closer, I was like, oh my God, that's me when I was 6. And so I lay behind him like I do with my son every night. And I held myself so tight and I cried with him. And I held him and I told him, I love you. You are loved. You are good enough. You're not alone anymore. I'll always be here for you. And he just melted into me. And for the first time in my life, I felt whole. And I just wonder how much trauma contributes to these mental health issues, having experienced what I've experienced now. Anyway, I kind of digressed there a bit. Sorry about that.
You didn't hit the nail on the head. No, you just described what everyone deals with. You just described what so-called mental illness is about. It's the best description of going deep and recovering that I've ever heard. It is what I aim at in therapy. I don't use any kind of drugs for it, but it's exactly what I aim at. But you did it better than most people I work with, and deeper because I think because of who you are. And so anybody listening, if you want to know everything you need to know about essentially the struggle to be a person, Dr. Malik has just drawn it out for you. It's so exact that the last psychology paper I wrote was just before COVID, and I've gotten a whole different direction than in my work. But I feel like it was my most important psychology, not on drugs or anything. And the theme of it is that the basic question for all people is, am I worthy of love? And the crushing answer is no, I'm not worthy of love. And from that flows all the issues of life. And you just said the same thing, I think.
Yeah.
And the paper was very well received at the journal, incidentally. They made it like the first paper in the journal. But I've gotten almost no feedback from it, almost zero. It's interesting.
Very
I'll send
interesting.
you a copy of it.
I'd
My
love
own
that.
mind has gone in different directions, but more and more in therapy, that's where I try to go with people. I try to go back to the early experiences of abject loneliness and abject feeling of being unloved and not deserving love. That's the real clinker. It's not just I'm unloved, it's I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Because the child can't say, I deserve it. You parents don't know what you're doing. My big brother's torturing me, doesn't know what we can't blame everybody. You can't do it. So we always blame ourselves. And this is like as deep as it gets, I think. But then comes in God, because in an ironic way, I'm not sure that we are deserving of love ultimately, but that it comes as a gift finally. My experience is a little different than yours. I may have been much more depressed than you. My experience was being loved, not myself, and loving somebody. In my first book on psychology, which has its problems, Psychology of Freedom, but in it, it's all about the importance of the joy of loving. It's entirely about that. And I was share it. I tried to share it with my clients, and one of my clients, who was a deeply religious Catholic, and now I'm going pre-Ginger. I'm going back maybe 50 years. She said to me, Peter, do you know you don't talk about loving yourself once in that whole book? It's all about loving other people, loving animals, loving life. And you don't believe in God. So she said, you must be so lonely. This wonderful woman. So for me, it was the big the big notion for me was was Ginger, and then she brought me the love of God. She would. There's a movie, an American movie. You probably made it a book. I'm sorry. Oh, that's it's Ginger's phone. I turned mine off. She left her phone behind.
It's all right. Do you want me to pause?
Yeah, I'll give.
There you go. I've forgotten now. We had that little interlude with the kids and everything. I don't even know what we were talking about. Oh, let me quickly just say, you know what? In that, like, I'm not advocating magic mushrooms for everybody. Um, I actually don't think it is for everybody. Like, I've met people who've been to these retreats, and they think the work is just taking the mushrooms and going on a trip.
Hmm.
Actually, it's not. The mushrooms show you the problem. Afterwards, you have to do the inner integration. You have to do the work. Um, the mushrooms isn't a shortcut, but I feel like it's some people treat it like a drug. They just want the drug to do the work.
Yeah, I'm glad
When
you
I
brought that up. I wasn't going to bring that up, but I'm glad you brought it up.
and I genuinely now do not believe that is alone the answer. And I
No.
actually believe that you can do the work without the magic mushrooms as well.
Yes.
You can do it from the talking therapy, the right people like yourself. There's someone called Meredith Miller who's amazing. You can do it in different ways, and it doesn't have to involve taking a plant medicine or a other type of drug. And I know people who've done the magic mushrooms, and I don't think they've benefited it from as much as I have listening to them. You know, they keep going back again and again. And I just feel like maybe you should try something different. Maybe, you know, it's not for you. So I just wanted to tell you that. But I also wanted to say that in my experience, in my trip, I something very amazing happened, Peter. So I found myself outside the universe. It was dark. I knew I was looking at the universe from outside,
Mhm.
and I could see the frequency of the universe, and it was making a noise like so, oh, my daughter's just moved the camera. Oh, Lord, this doesn't normally happen. Anyway, so as I was looking, I saw this frequency of the universe, and it was making a noise, and I didn't know what that noise was until afterwards. I looked it up, and it was like this blue azure line, and then I felt when I made that noise, I was like a little yellow line, frequency line. And as I tried to match the frequency of the noise, I felt what I was seeing was the God universe frequency. And I was going home. It sounds weird. And for a second, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get subsumed. I'm going to dissolve away and melt, and I will lose my identity when I joined this God consciousness. But when I joined the God consciousness, what I realized was I was just one tiny thread in this massive, gigantium tapestry that is God. And I'm not saying I'm God, I'm just saying I was like this one tiny thread of it. And I felt the most incredible bliss and joy. Not sexual, not love. It's indescribable. It was just pure contentment, gratitude, bliss, harmony, sense of being home. And at that point, the voice in my head said, you know, this is what you are. We are all part of God. And you're just one tiny fragment, tiny, 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 tiny fragment. And you have forgotten who you are, that you are part of this. And then I separated and blah, blah, blah. And I think, wow, like maybe now, you know, because I'm not a Muslim. I gave that up 20 years ago. I don't practice any religion, but I do believe in a God and a creator. I don't think we're just random coincidence. I don't believe in that. But that was my experience, and I don't know what you think of that.
No, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think, by the way, I think we should give up the original program that was, you were gonna, sort of look at my legacy and my history and stuff. This is more about our future as a people and humanity. And I think we should just keep talking about the deepest stuff.
All right.
Uh,
Okay.
and because I was just thinking about that, because I want to put this up on our website. I want to have you on we're going to interview you too. Ginger's going to set up a time to interview you. but what an interview it could be. You're talking about all the things I'm struggling with right now and thinking about right now. Ginger teases me, and no, I tease myself. She reassures me. She says that God put you in a place where you had to be practically pure reason. You had to be able to write books and articles about psychiatry that didn't deviate from science and pure reason. I've been in court over 100 times. You had to be able to handle any kind of attack with reason and research and background, she said. And in effect, I think what's been happening lately is, okay, I've done all that and I've got the big book out on COVID. I'm going deeper to places you've already been. And trying to understand more about all the connections. Actually, I will deviate a little bit back to the bigger reality. One of the things that I've been seeing as I hear other people talking about the world right now is they are missing what's going on. First, because they're not looking at God, but second, because they're not looking at empire. What essentially is going on right now is what's been going on for 4,000 years, ever since we got together gave up hunter-gathering, started to, do agriculture and raise animals and stuff. We have been sitting ducks for predators. And within a few thousand years of our starting to settle down, 10,000 years ago, by then the bullies had already just slaughtered and enslaved us and divided us up into empires. It's before the written word. We barely know the names of the empires. It's just verbal. And what I just was writing today and yesterday, this is the first time I'm talking about it, except with Ginger, is that if you look back at the Bible, it tells you that it was always between God and the empires. It was always between God, the empires, and human freedom and human love. And I'll be reformulating it as I'm talking. And I didn't really want to do this session today, in part because this was in my head. I've got this in my head. And she was saying, come on out. You'll love this guy. You liked him a lot. Come on out. and I'm thinking in my head, I want to be in the book. Honey, that I just told you. Because the last 2 nights are the first times I told her about the whole new beginning of what I'm doing with the book. And the first thing the Bible tells you that's of massive importance is that God intervenes to free the Jews against the empire, against the Egyptian empire. And then you get the 10 Commandments, which is about what we owe God and God will do for us and what we owe each other. It's first about the divine and then it's about our relationships. But there's no love in it. But that's a key point. And that point mattered so much that our founders, they set up a committee to do the national seal. And the Congress appointed, what a committee, Jefferson, Franklin, and John Adams, to be the committee. And starting with the lead of Franklin, they agreed upon that the reverse side of the coin would be Moses holding up his staff, the burning tower of God connecting to him, and in the forefront, the Pharaoh and the army drowning. That's how deeply our founders felt about Exodus. And then it goes along for another maybe 2,000 years. And along comes Jesus. And in a way, no man has ever done before, or God or man. I'm a Jew who thinks Jesus was the greatest prophet. There's no religion like that, so that's just what I am. And Jesus says, I have a new commandment. He literally says it. He's reading the Old Testament. He sees it. He's actually a scholar of it. And he says a new commandment, and that is that you should love one another as I love you. And you should love God and let God love you. Throughout the Bible, many times he talks about loving one another, and then loving one another as I love you, then loving one another as God loves you, and love God, and so on. There's nothing like this anywhere else written in the whole world. Just like there's nothing like the Ten Commandments. I mean, you go to Hammurabi's Code or whatever. There's nothing like the Ten Commandments. It comes out of nothing. There's nothing about God liberating a ragtag group of people, so the Jews, so that they can go out and spread the word of the one God. There's nothing like it. Nothing like freedom being there. No other books. They're all about basically empires and multiple gods and stuff like that. So there's these 2 points, and they both come together in these amazing founders who actually try to create a government for the freedom of the people for the first time in the history of the world.
Well, I think Jesus was a badass. I think he was amazing. I think he was real.
Just unbelievable.
I think he was, I think he was real. And I think he was fighting Roman Empire. Roman Empire controlled Judea. He was fighting against the collaborators, Herod and the temple elites.
The elite. He was fighting the elite of the Jews and the empire. Yeah. He's immersed in the empire.
And I think he was a rebel fighter. I think he wasn't some passive, quiet little fella. He was tossing tables. He was causing a big stink. I mean, at the end of the day, they killed him because he was a major threat. I mean, even the crucifixion is something you do that, is a threat to the state. That's how they deemed him. He was a threat to the state. Yeah. So he was subversive to them. They thought he was dangerous. He was not endorsing Roman authority or the temple elites, and he was a danger to everyone. And what he was teaching was the opposite to empire. He was talking about kingdom of God, not some future thing. He was saying, look, we can have it now based on justice, love, humility, mercy. But the kingdom that was there, the Roman Empire and the kingdom of Judea or whatever, that was in direct opposition to these values. It was all about empire, exploitation, militarism, elitism, which was fundamentally everything against what Jesus was talking about. And to be honest, Jesus' story is applicable now because you've got the elites, the predator class, you got the global empire, the one world government, and then you got people who believe in freedom for everybody and love and justice and, opposing all this. I mean, the story carries on. It's not changed. It's not changed.
This is the opening chapter of my book now. What you're talking about.
So, you know how you're Jewish? I've never understood this, right? Because it's not a religion, it's not ethnicity, it's not a race, it's not just culture. It's a bit of everything. So you sound like someone who's Jewish, but is also a Christian. Where does it fit in? Because I'm not a Christian, I'm not a Muslim, but I believe in Jesus Christ being a real person, and I believe he was an amazing human being. But I feel like his true story is hidden from us. I align more with the Gnostic teachings, and I think what he was talking about I'm God and God is within us and the Father and the Son. I think he was trying to say that we've all got God within us, and we do. If God is everywhere, he is within us too. We are all children of God as well. So I kind of think along those lines. FYI, full transparency.
Well,
I know some
the
people
odd
might get
thing
upset.
is that you never say anything that's out of a line with what I believe. It's very strange.
That's really strange.
Very strange.
I wasn't expecting you to say that.
And it's exactly what I'm working on in my own mind, but I'm shyer than you. I'm moving out of a lifetime of being super scientist who will be able to debate, the chief of surgery of neurosurgery at Harvard and prove he doesn't know anything. Um, and so this new way is kind of coming at me.
So you're moving into a philosophical realm. So the thing is with science, science is great.
No,
And
I've always been in philosophy. No, I'm moving into the spiritual
yeah,
realm.
yeah, spiritual philosophy. Yeah, 100%.
No, it's not even, I don't, philosophy. Oh, I was a philosopher when I was 12. No, it's really different. It's more like what we're talking about today and trying to put together, folks who hear this, to me, we are trying to put together the entire largest possible thinking with the most personal, intimate kind of thinking. This is very unusual. I've not had this conversation before. Ginger was trying to think about who I could have this conversation with because I couldn't imagine who I could have her with. And I'm having it with you. So
there you go. An ex-British orthopedic surgeon, ex-Muslim, Scottish. How random. There you go. But the thing as well is like, a lot of these things you cannot do with science. I'll give an example. If our existence is a goldfish bowl and we're fish in a goldfish bowl, we're trying to understand the reality of the goldfish and the world outside of that.
yeah.
And as a goldfish, we're incapable of doing that. We are in the bowl. We can do all the experiments we like, and we can measure and analyze and look at, but we have the vantage point of that goldfish in the bowl. We will never have the perspective of standing outside and looking at the room and the flat and the apartment and the city where that goldfish and it's the bowl lives in. We will never have that appreciation. We can never go into different dimensions and different viewpoints. So that's why you have to just think sometimes in a spiritual manner. And over the years, I don't know. I think you just raise your consciousness, your frequency, you tap into your innate self. You start to listen to the body and your universe around you, and you just get a sense. And it's difficult to explain. It's not very scientific what I'm telling you. You just get this innate sense of what you think is right and what's wrong and what is and what isn't. And I am. It's as simple as that, Peter.
And that's what God said.
I am.
God says, I am who I am.
Yeah.
That's, I think, one of the first words in the Bible is where God, from God, where he literally says, I am who I am.
I'm just getting goosebumps. Yeah. I am. It's as simple as that. So yeah, I don't always have these kind of conversations either, but sometimes they go off on tangent.
Don't get shy about it.
No, not at all.
This is really good, and these are not tangents. We're in the middle. And your description with the fishbowl is very, very vivid, and I think it's almost exactly that feeling that I have. That is why I don't have any theology or any particular real religion in that sense, same sense that you don't. It's because I know I'm incapable of it, that I'll just be making up something. So
Right.
if I come out and to make some definitive statement about something that has to do with God, um, I know that I'm the goldfish. I like this. I like your man. I'm the goldfish. What am I doing with coming up with theology? I want to get as deep as I can into the human experience and how to explain it and understand it. And I'm astonished that we can do as well as we're doing right now, for example, and trying to find some communality and where do we get to after all these years?
Yeah.
And you've
It,
been much more spiritual in a way ahead of me because I have been so immersed in the fight of taking on psychiatry. I mean, it was
well,
literally,
well, Peter, I have to thank COVID. And this is a funny,
yeah.
strange thing that if you said to me, Ahmed, it's in your powers to snap your fingers and, COVID never happened. You could go back to your old life and it'd be 2025 and no mRNA jabs and no lockdowns and no mandates. I don't think I would click my fingers. I know it sounds bizarre. Forgive me, everyone, if you're upset at hearing that, because I'm glad it happened because I've now woken up to so many things. I'm not saying I'm awake. I think that never happens because to be truly awake, you need to be awake to every lie and deceit in history of
Mhm.
man, and that's impossible. Every day I just learn and uncover a new thing that I thought I knew and I realize I didn't know. And actually the older I get, the more I realize I don't know. So it's just an awakening process. But I have awoken to so many lies and deceit. I don't want to go back to the state of ignorance. I also like the fact I'm now doing a podcast. I love the fact I'm having these amazing conversations with people all around the world. I love the fact I'm helping people try and understand the world around us. And I'm really grateful that I've gone on this spiritual journey because 5 years ago, I was just like any other orthopedic surgeon, trying to build my practice, make as much money as possible, pay off my mortgage early, go on nice holidays, and have a good lifestyle. And that was it. I was just deep, deep in that world, and it was a rat race. And your measure of success is how big is your car, and how big is your house, and how many fancy holidays you go on, and how big is your private practice. You know, um, that those were the metrics. And I was in a very fake artificial world and I wasn't living my true authentic self. And now COVID has taken me on this roller coaster journey and I've tapped into the spiritual realm. I feel closer to God than ever before, although I've never set foot in a mosque or a synagogue or a temple or a church in the last God knows how many years. Um, I don't pray to God every day in any kind of ritualistic manner, but I just carry him in my heart and I feel closer to God as a result and more spiritual. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything in the last 5 years, frankly. I feel like there's a global awakening taking place. And the race
Mhm.
is now between the predators locking us down in their authoritarian global cage and us awakening, enough of us awakening to what the scheme is and stopping them from happening. And I think one of the reasons why the world just seems to get crazy and crazier is I think that these so-called predators are getting increasingly desperate because they know people are now talking about things that 20 years ago no one would ever have spoken about. There is this awakening. And part of that spiritual journey has been because I've realized, look, the answer isn't, the answer isn't finding all these predators and shooting them or hanging them or doing a Nuremberg trial or locking them up forever and throwing away the key. We give them the power every single day, all of us, by buying their rubbish, garbage food, consuming their garbage TV, by buying their stuff, by consuming their fear porn on the news, by hating other people, by being divided constantly and not seeing the commonality in every other person and seeing that actually fundamentally we're all the same, we are the one. um we as a human species need to raise our spirituality, raise our global consciousness, and only when we do that will we defeat these evil predators. It's not through the voting booth, it's not through the polls, it's not changing this politician or that politician or getting a new political party in or getting your Trumps around. No, it's every single one of us needs to up their game. And until that happens, nothing will change. It's like you said, it's been going on for thousands of years. These empires have come and gone, come and gone. This cycle of humanity is against the predators and getting freedom and then back to the predators. We don't break this cycle until we lift our consciousness, our vibration, our frequency, our spirituality. I'll just stop there.
That's lovely. It's It's a kind of odd because everything you talk about and the tone is pretty much where I am right now. So interesting. Um, it's pretty much exactly where Ginger and I are. If COVID hadn't come along, I would still be thinking that my knowledge of evil is and how bad evil is probably exemplified by the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry. And it's not even close. That world that I was in, and there's glimmers of me seeing outside it. And, I was writing about the whole idea of a libertarian world and all these other different things. But the big change was, this is probably more symbolic than real, but the big change was hearing Fauci say that he was science.
Yeah.
And I realized that we were really in for trouble. There was an evil going on here of a new kind. And maybe it's the ultimate technocracy. I haven't thought of it that way. The ultimate technocracy is a scientist saying, I am technocracy and there's no God. So I am it. And I would never, if without COVID, as far as I know, I would never have gotten to see that what I had learned from being in a courtroom against the drug companies, from going sometimes face to face with these guys at meetings, that was just a one cutting edge of evil, and that the model was the same for the whole world. And that let me write that book. All I did was take the model I knew and Ginger knew from being with me and on her own. She had her own deep ideas. And I just dove in and said, okay, who's the money behind it? The pharmaceutical industry? Who's the planners? Who's to benefit from all this? And it just went bing, bing, bing. Every time I asked the right question, I got an answer. And
So who is the money behind it?
I think the question is, what is evil? Because it's the evil behind it. I mean, because once you get through looking at the money, you see that these are different kind of people. These people are evil. And one of the things I'm trying to describe just in the last couple of days is if you try to think about the predator as yourself, you will be his victim. I need to write that down. So because that's a little better than I wrote down today. If you try to think about the predator as if, he's yourself or something, you will be his victim. And the reason is the predator's first thought about us is, how do I get them? How do I destroy them? How do I enslave them? How do I exploit them? There is no God. I don't have to worry about that. There is no good and evil. None of that matters. How do I get to be emperor? Or the emperor's assistant? Or make a lot of money off from the emperor? Whereas the ordinary person is thinking, how do I escape from this evil? Not how do I kill it, murder it, torture it? How do I escape it? How do I protect my family? How do I manage? And that is not the same way of the evil that's coming at you. And that's one of the reasons why the predators strike first, because that's what they're about. They're about hate. They're not about making the most money. That was the money trail. They're about something close to generating the most possible hate and violence toward other human beings. And if you look at the greatest, and at one point or another, most adored violent people of our last few centuries, That's who they are, whether it's Hitler or Stalin or Mao. They
But
killed
who are the
hundreds of millions of people.
who are the predators today, though?
What is helping me track them since the book? In the book, I list them and I talk about all the people who are part of the Western globalism. The people who run globalism essentially are evil. And then I began to realize that in the new way I'm looking, is that they're divided up into empires. So to begin looking at who they are, just as people, not as evil and God, you just look at, well, what are the empires? There's the American Empire, who's been running that. That's the elite of the Republican and Democratic parties. It's the uniparty. It's fading. It overdid it. When we really became a full-fledged empire when one president, second Bush, just took it on himself to build a Bush doctrine and go invade and murder a lot of Muslims and a lot of people in the Middle East, and that was where America, I think, got so disillusioned. The empire started to lose some of its force, and so that's one empire. That's one of the empires we live in. But it's dying. It's trying to stop Trump with all its might. Under it is the deep state. But the deep state's like a mini empire. It's not one of the huger ones. It might be bigger. Maybe when I finish talking today or tomorrow, it'll be one of the 6 empires. But that empire, where'd you go?
I'm here. I was looking for your book. Trying to find it again.
Oh,
It's been a while since I read it. I can't find it. Anyway, carry on. I'm
well, I
listening.
could grab a copy, but COVID-19 and the global predators.
Yeah.
And this, what I'm talking to you now is chapter 1 of a book that is probably going to be called something like Anti-God Empires.
Yeah, well, I agree with all of this. I think
So
ultimately,
let me give you the quick outline.
okay.
All right. So look at who are the empires. Right now, there's the Western global empire that has really trying to eat up America under Biden and under the other progressive before him, who has a Muslim name, Obama. There was he pulled us really out of the American empire. He went around, he apologized for the American empire. So we're evil. And he brought in the global empire. In particular, a very odd combination he brought in of the Westerners, where you get into NATO and you get into the EU and you get into Klaus Schwab and you get into more the UN and you get into this whole Western civilization deteriorating global empire, which is eating up the American empire. And that's the projection that they all want. And he's also a deep sympathizer with the Muslim empire. And if you go and you look at the Muslim empire, it's in chaos right now. And because Trump bombed the heck out of Iran, which I think is probably the leader of the Muslim empire, people don't realize the Muslim empire has had 2 of the largest empires in the history of the world in previous times. Twice it's nearly swallowed Europe over hundreds and hundreds of years. And it at the heart of the original statement of Muhammad is the notion that by the sword and conversion, the whole globe will be Muslim under Allah. And he meant it. And one of the earliest things he did was to start slaughtering his neighbors and slaughtering Jews as a part of the empire. So right now they're having bad times, and Trump is standing up to them. Another empire is the Russian. The Russian also have had one of the largest empires in the history of the world, under the Russian Empire, then the USSR. And they got beat up badly in the Cold War, and they lost the Cold War. But Putin is right out of the history of empires. And I think he's more an emperor than he's not a communist anymore. And then finally you get communist China. Communist China goes back to the oldest empires too. These empires were competing hundreds and hundreds of years ago. thousands to some extent. And the communist empire is built on communism partly, but Putin's also a monarchy. He loves the empires, China.
Peter, can I ask you
So,
something?
God,
So basically, I get the whole idea of blocks, big blocks, power blocks, geopolitical blocks. I get all that. And
empires, though.
empires.
People, you have to get empires because empires are the destruction of humanity.
Yeah, but
They
going back,
start from the beginning. So I really don't want you to blow off empires, but go ahead.
no, I get that, I get that. But for example, in the Muslim world, the Shiites and Sunnis are very different people, very different, very, very
Oh,
different.
yeah, they're at war with each other.
Yeah,
Yes.
Iran is just on its own, and then you got the Sunni countries, and there is no empire. They're all very divided. They can't stand each
They're
other, all
very
of them.
divided. They will get together in our time.
Really? So,
I
okay,
think so.
so a lot of people question Zionist Jews and Zionist Christians
You may
in a
not want
lo
to go there with me, but I
sorry?
will go.
Yeah,
We're going to
that's what I'm
divide
saying.
here a little bit. Go ahead.
So no, but this is why I want to ask you, like, because you're an example of someone who's Jewish, who I think is a really good person. And I don't agree with statements when I hear things like, oh, it's the Muslims, it's the Jews, it's the blacks. I think that's very divisive and very wrong. I think there's good and bad people in every group. And I think whoever the bad people are,
This is why you don't want to look at empires.
no, but I was going to say, I
When
think that,
empires are in charge, they are motivating ordinary people to be bad.
so what I was going to say
So
was, I think the bad people have traumatized and used some people who are Jewish into doing some of their bad work, but that's not reflective of all Jews. What do you think about the heavy influence of people doing bad stuff right now? I mean, the neocons and the left and the Democrats and the Republican who are heavily Zionist. The bankers, these families, the Rothschilds. What do you think their
I
influence
think you've
is?
been reading anti-Semitic literature.
Really?
Yeah.
This isn't me reading anything. This is like just people saying things. I'm reading and
Well, it would take
watching.
me a little while. I was not going to go there because I heard you talking about Israel earlier. I was just going to let that part go. I would love to talk with you about it.
Yeah, go, go, go.
I mean, I should finish by 2. I should finish in 25 minutes. Sure. It's 2 hours, and I've got a patient
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
a couple of patients today.
Well, I'm going to let you just talk. Go for it.
Okay. The I'm trying to think of exactly where to start with it. The Jews are the oldest, as far as I know, existing people that can be identified. There's nobody else with a book with all these concepts that go back all that time who are an identifiable people who call themselves Jews. And there's nobody walking around calling themselves, a Pharaoh's Egyptian, you know. The empires have disappeared. The Jews are the only remaining single people. And they participated in bringing to the world the idea of freedom, the idea of one God, the idea of the Ten Commandments. The predators have never forgiven them. And of all the people they want to eat alive and spit out, it is the Jews. And that was amazingly demonstrated during the Holocaust, when Roosevelt wouldn't bomb the railroad tracks, going to the ovens and the slaughters. When the Red Cross went in and said, "Yeah, these are nice places. They got a band playing." When no one went to the defense of the people who brought all of that to the world, including Jesus, and Jesus was a Jew. A lot of Christians forget that, but a lot of Christians really know it. So they brought all that right up to Jesus into this world. They are marked for death and destruction by evil because they brought Western civilization in. And then, because of this oddity that the empires forced them into being dispersed around the world, they managed with the book to stay together. and the belief in God. Their own empires were taken from them. Now, in the Old Testament, God tells the Jews that you don't want to have kings. Believe me, it's very clear. It's one of the most amazing passages. He says, you want kings? They're going to basically rape you and take your money and, kill your children under war chariots. Don't have kings. So the Jews disobey. They're always disobeying God. Always. And God is, in the Old Testament, is always getting angry, and in the New Testament, he forgives. So the Jews have been marked for destruction everywhere they go because they don't fit into any empire. And that's where it came in that one of the first acts of Muhammad was to kill somewhere around 600 Jews in his neighborhood because they wouldn't bow. Everyone else said, okay, we'll do this. You'll tolerate our little religious stuff, but we'll tolerate Allah. And the Jews said, it doesn't go like that. It doesn't go like that. Now, the Jews are people. So they've got betrayers in them. They've got people who work with the Nazis, ordinary people. But that's not how God made them. It's not what he made them stand for, clearly. If you believe in God at all. That's not what happened. That's where I'm struggling with thinking that way and now bringing it to that level. Look, that seems to be the history. Maybe it's not real history. Maybe it's in the minds of the old rabbis. Patriarchy, they were imperialists. The old rabbis wrote that book, were imperialists. I mean, the Old Testament is just full of violence against other people. But there's this other stuff. And that's what people hate. They like the idea that if you really looked at it, the early Jews were under God's commandments, slaughtering people. It's a terrible thing. But they like that. They don't like what the Jews did. And that's because they're anti-God. The predators, the empires are anti-God. And so was the Jewish Empire. And so were the Pharisees who collaborated with the Roman Empire and put Jesus to death. It's the empires. It's the Jewish kingdom. Something you may have missed in the Bible, by the way, about Jesus being a warrior. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when they come to take him away, people don't talk about this. He says to his followers, he says to the people there, he says, put your swords down. They had swords. The apostles, they had weapons. The Bible, I think, it's put together by people. Things are taken out. I don't think Jesus ever said, give to Caesar what Caesar's due, unless under his breath he said, and you know what that is.
Yeah, well,
all right. So this is the beginning of this. Let me.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the empire and the Jews. So when the Jews are exterminated, one half of the Jews are exterminated in Central Europe. Nobody wants them. A number managed to come into America because it is not quite an empire yet back then. So a lot of Jews get there. The real empire gets going right after the war, I think, World War II. So a lot of Jews manage to emigrate and they get into you. It's the only place that's going to take them. Even though half of them in the world have been slaughtered. Nobody was going to take them. Because of Harry Truman, the UN, by I think a very narrow vote, I actually sat there as a kid listening to the vote on the radio. The UN approves a homeland for the Jews, which is essentially their original homeland. It is their homeland. Jews every year celebrate next year in Jerusalem. It's a part of the religion. It's the homeland. Yeah, but it's, of course, not all Jews want to go there, and that's complicated, and Jews are people. And from my viewpoint, it's a shame that the socialists dominated the Israel concept of government. On the day it is announced that Israel is a nation, is the first time the U.S. can send them arms. On that day, they're attacked by 5 Muslim nations. On the day they are created. And that attack, as a function of the Muslim religion, which is that the Jews are bad, it's in the Bible, Christians are bad too, has never ended. It has never ended.
Can I say something back, if that's all right?
All right, let's stop there in history.
Yeah, so
But
basically,
not back. Let's explore together. That's how I understand the history up to then. Not that
sure.
the Jews are wonderful people, but that the role they play is so antithetical to the empires.
Can I tell you, my understanding as well, if that's all right?
Sure.
So basically, as a Muslim, when I was a Muslim for 30 years, I read the Quran, read the books,
I don't
all,
know the phrase you just said. Oh, a Muslim. You're saying Muslim. I
yeah,
say it as the
I,
English differently. Go ahead.
yeah, when I was a Muslim for 20 years, or 30 years, we read the Quran and everything. One thing that stuck out a lot, there was a lot of respect for Jews. We were told you can't marry anyone unless they're of the book, which includes Jews. And there's a lot of respect given to Jews because
Were you a Sunni, by the way, or were you
Sunni,
what?
Sunni,
Yeah.
and because it was like that's the origin of the faith. Moses, Abraham, these are all, revered prophets in the Quran, and they're talked about constantly.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of respect in Islam for Jews and Judaism and Christianity, and
If they stay in their place.
so and I'm just saying, and so
Yeah.
what I'm
Go
trying to
ahead.
say is
I'm aware of that.
I never met any Muslim who had anything bad to say about Jews. There was nothing but respect because of the shared history. And when there were talks of, wars against the Jewish tribes in Arabia, it was because they were warring with all the different tribes, and they were saying, like, for example, the one tribe said they were going to be allegiance with the Muslims, and then they turned on them, and then there was a war and all that kind of stuff. And look, don't get me wrong, I don't like any war. I don't justify any of it. And some of the stuff that the Muslim armies did, and I read in the Quran, I'm like, what? I don't like any of this. So I don't like any of this kind of stuff. But it wasn't black and white. Oh, the Jews need to be murdered, because actually, Jews lived in Muslim lands for centuries, if not millennia. When the pogroms were happening in Europe, when the Reformation and when they were expelled from Spain, guess where they all went? They were living in Muslim lands and they were sheltered there. And actually, when in Europe, in Eastern Europe in particular, and England and France, when they were treating the Jews really badly in the 1800s and the early 1900s, Jews went to America, like you just said, and South America, but they also went to the Arab countries. A lot of them migrated, and you can just look up the figures. You had 10 to 20,000 around 1882, and from 1882 to 1993, there was about 35,000 from Eastern Europe went to Yemen, believe it or not, of all places. You had the second Aliyah, 1904 to 1914. 40,000 Jews, primarily from Russia and Poland, moved to Tel Aviv. Started kibbutz movements, and again in the 1920s, another 40,000 went post-Russian Revolution, to Palestine, and in the early 1930s, again 250,000 to 300,000 Jews, all fleeing Nazi Germany, went to the Middle East, to Palestine, and they were on the whole accepted and welcome because they were rich, they were affluent, they were wonderful, immigrants coming in with knowledge and expertise, and my understanding from the history, and I've spoken to lots of people from lots of different backgrounds, Jeremy Hammond's a good reference point, that at the time of the State of Israel, the local Palestinians were disarmed by the British who were running the place. They were not given any weapons. But the Jewish population were allowed to keep their weapons. And they were doing, some of them, not all of them, were doing terrorist acts against the Palestinians. You've got the gangs, you know about the gangs, Stern gangs and all these other ones. And there was a lot of terrorism taking place. And they bombed the David Hotel. And then at the time of the independence, all the different groups, Catholic, Roman Catholic, Orthodox Christian, Muslim, Shia, Druze, all the different groups said, look, we don't want a religious country. Can we just have Palestine, a land for all people of all religions? And the only people who said no were the Jewish people, who said, we want to have a state of Israel and it'll be a Jewish state. And all the other groups, the Christian and Muslim groups, were like, no, we don't want this. We just want one country called Palestine and we all live together. And when Israeli Jews said, no, we're going to do it, that's when the other countries came in and said, no, we're not going to let this happen and everything. But
well, wait a minute. 1948, the nation is created. I think it's 48. And they were attacked by 5 armies.
I know, but what I'm trying to say is the local people, the local Muslims and Christians did not want a state of Israel. They wanted the state of Palestine that was not religious.
Sure, of course. Of course, nobody wants the...
They didn't want a religious state, but the Jews in Israel said, no, we want this to be our country and it has to be Jewish. And I'm saying,
we want our country back, the Jews said. You forget that.
But that's like, for example, in Northern Ireland, there's British people there and they've been there for 200 years, English people. And it's now like saying the Irish people say, we want Northern Ireland back.
Well, it's not exactly the same because the entire area is filled with the antiquity of Judaism, with the Bible stories. The Bible is about the Jews in that land. See, if you don't see the uniqueness of the one existing group, identifiable group of people through all the empires, who have survived all the empires because they believed in one God and it wasn't the emperor. If you don't see that, you don't get, it's just some people invading. It's just the Indians coming back and taking New York or something.
But the Palestinian people are only culturally Arab. They're not genetically Arab, like from the Arab Peninsula. They're actually Semites. They're Palestinians.
Well, there's almost no government there, as I understand. But no. This is what I would say to you. Can I respond? We only have 10 minutes, or would you like to finish?
No, fire away.
All right. The terrorism that occurred in Israel, they're people, but Israel's not a terrorist state. In fact, the folks the people who were setting up the state of Israel suppressed the Irgun. You're talking about the Irgun terrorists.
That's it.
And they actually were, in fact, suppressed by Israel. And Israel has never been a terrorist state in the sense of saying we are going to annihilate all the Arabs or all the Muslims.
I never said that, by the way. I never said it was a terrorist state.
Well, I'm not arguing. I'm telling you the story. This is not about what you think. It's about my story.
Okay. Got you.
Really? No, it's no way to. So they have been confronted by people who want to annihilate them, who repeated constantly, we're going to destroy you. Israel goes along with setting up Gaza, which I think was also our CIA setting up this state next to Israel. And Israel allowed it. They could have probably stopped it. And the idea was it would be a democratic state. And because states aren't ready for democracy, it immediately became a terrorist Hamas state under Iran. And from its inception, somebody put it beautifully, they weren't building up, they were building down. They were building a fortress against Israel from the inception. And from the inception of it, the Hamas have bombed Israel. Who puts up with that? Who puts up with a state that gets created, the democracy is taken over by a terrorist group financed by the worst terrorist nation in the history of the world, and they're allowed to sit there and fire rockets at will at Israel, killing Israelis? It's unheard of. And the world has never demanded it of any nation but Israel because they hate the Jews. And why ultimately do they hate the Jews? Because they kept God alive. I really think that is a big part of the issue. They kept alive the idea that human individuality and identity and separateness, as well as belonging and having your own customs and so on, are the heart of being a human being. I don't want to go into any detail, and you will know much more detail about the Muslim empire than I would, or the separate nations that were making the empires, but those are mostly creations of the West, as you know, those nations in Islam. It's basically Islam.
Do you know a lot of
But I just
Hindus?
want to say the Jews were always second class by law. They did not participate in the politics of the community. They had special rules and regulations, and they put up with it because there was no place else to go. They didn't go there because they loved the Arabs or the Muslims. They had no place to go. How could you, well, no, I don't want to talk that way. Think about asking the Jews to set up another state where they're living with other people after the Holocaust. Imagine asking the Jewish leaders, when no country would take them, every country practically cheered their murder, that they now, for the first time, we're going to say we're coming back. We still have Jews there. There have always been Jews in Jerusalem, always been Jews there. That was our, not empire, but that's what it was this kind of mini empire. We're coming back. We're going to defend ourselves with guns. Jews were not allowed to own guns anywhere until they got back to Israel. Anywhere. Not with Muslims. Not with that. They couldn't defend themselves when the Muslims went a little nutty like people do.
Do you know what? Yeah, listen, I understand your argument. But
good. That's all I really want. But
I know, but I'm just going to politely disagree. I just think two wrongs don't make a right. I mean, I'll give an example. You know, the Haganah, that was a terrorist organization. The first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, he was a member of that. The Stern Gang, Yitzhak Shamir.
That all, when Israel formed, all of that was suppressed. You're absolutely right.
So Yitzhak Shamir, he was a prime minister in the 80s. He was part of the Stern Gang.
That may be. Look at how Israel has behaved. Israel has put up with.
Okay, so take, for example, October 7th. That was a false flag. That was a 9/11.
That very well may be a false flag. I do not defend the Israeli government. I defend no governments.
Good. Neither do I. I think all governments are evil. All governments
basically the stronger
sacrifice
they get, the more evil they get.
Yeah,
that's right.
Governments will happily.
I do not defend, but I can't. But I will say that as a Zionist, I mean, I almost went over there and fought in one of the wars. I was in a uniformed service. It would have been treason. I was in the U.S. Public Health Service at the time. And, but I will defend the right of the Jews, and they are my people. We're an identifiable people going all the way back.
So,
say no more slaughters of Jews. We will have guns.
So I think, we've got so much in common, but this is the one thing we're in difference. Like, you're a Zionist and I'm not. I think what I want is people to identify as human beings and team humanity and not choose a tribe and a group. I just feel like the solution is that we all realize how we have so much in common.
That will happen only in heaven. That is not what God has given us.
I think this is what I mean by the kingdom of God. I think Jesus wants us to make it now on this planet, not at some time in the future.
Well, he certainly never said that.
I know, but what I'm saying is this is what I think. This is what I think he meant by kingdom of heaven: justice, peace, love.
See, that leads to communism. That leads to the idea that we'll create this utopian society. I think that's where we may be differing.
No, I'm totally decentralized. I do not want communism. I'm totally against communism. No. So, for example, to me, one of the solutions for Israel right now is, you create a united states of Israel and Palestine. And it's not a Jewish state. It's not a Muslim state. It's not a Christian state. It is a state. It is decentralized. There's a tiny government.
You want us to build a state where the children have been taught to kill Jews.
You can say the vice versa. You can say that where the Jewish people are taught about Amalek. Netanyahu talked about the Amalek and the Amalek in the biblical history.
Well, it's maybe another reason not to have two states. Even two states. Maybe, listen, I think you're being utopian because I think you actually agree with me on the central real life point, which is right now it's the sovereign nations of the world that are protecting themselves from collectivism and globalism. And
True.
that's where we are. The Jews have always had to protect themselves that way, but they never had guns. So the Jews were slaughtered wantonly, probably everywhere they
But
went. And
what
it did
about all the
happen.
what about all the Gazans being slaughtered right now? As a Jew, doesn't that hurt you? Like that was what was done to the Jews.
Why hasn't a single Arab nation let the Gazans out? They make a prison of Gaza in order to humiliate the Jews.
So what the
No
answer?
Arab nation has come and said, we'll make a democracy out of Gaza.
But
We'll
that's the
stand up and
that's
protect Jews in Gaza.
but that's their home. That the Palestinians live there. So
No, it's the place they were forced into when nobody would take them. The Arabs wouldn't take the Arabs who were fighting with the Jews and got driven out by the Jews.
And so you think the answer is that the people keep fleeing and be forced to move away from their own ancestral land?
No, the answer was what the Jews did. They allowed the setup of Gaza. They allowed it to become a democracy, and they had U.S. support for that. A miracle of patience, because they've been attacked by these people ever since the beginning. They allowed that, and then Hamas took over, suppressed the Gazans worse than the Jews probably ever have until the war started. Suppressed them, built tunnels under their hospitals, used mosques as places to store weapons. They took over Gaza. And they then attacked the Jews.
Do you know that Hamas was set up and organized by Israel to counter the Fatah movement and the PLO? They wanted something that wasn't secular. They wanted to divide the Palestinian resistance.
I don't know the details of that. I've heard that actually was set up by the CIA as well.
If you listen to Uriel Cohen, he was an Israeli general.
I'm going to leave you with a. Hang on.
I know, but this Israeli general
this
even
is a terrible
said,
way to end. Go ahead.
"Oh no, well,
I love you anyway.
I love you. I love you.
Come back to that. Yeah.
I love you. But listen, if you listen to Anver Cohen, he was a former Israeli religious affairs official in Gaza. He said, "Hamas, to my regret, is Israel's creation." And Anthony Cordesman said Israel aided Hamas for years. They thought Hamas would help them weaken the PLO. And this is the problem, this is what happens when you support these groups of people and, you bring in the fundamentalists like they did in Syria, and you get rid of the normal, rational people, the resistance, and you create this Frankenstein monster. That's what's happened. But what I'm trying to say is, like, right now, the world is watching Israel and is bombing all these people, these civilians, these children. I don't know if you've seen the footage.
They are slaves of the Arabs. They are not allowed out. When Israel was formed, no Arab nation took the people that had to flee there, or who'd been fighting and fled, or weren't fighting and fled. Israel was establishing itself as a very, very tiny sliver of a nation. I think it was 5 miles across at its waist, fighting for its life against 5 Arab nations. Everybody in the world expected and hoped they'd be slaughtered, and they weren't. That's the beginning of Israel. And from then on, the Muslim nations have made themselves enemies of Israel, and it fits perfectly with the idea of the elite Muslim community and Muhammad, which is that they want to build a world empire. They don't want the Jews to run anything. No one wants the Jews to have their own country. That way, you've really documented beautifully. We are not going to be helpless victims anymore. The guy watching, this touches the guy watching. Oh, this goes back to me. I'm 9 years old. I'm watching my folks, the people I'm a part of, all my neighbors, the Jews, and we're hanging from fences, and I thought I saw one of the people in the heaps moving, and I decided nobody's going to mess with me as a Jew ever.
Have you ever heard of it?
Yeah. Hang on, please, let me say. And I came out of that, And then I saw the Holocaust and the extermination. And then I hear the anti-Semitism that came at me and Ginger during the Israeli issues. And you're going to tell me we don't need a separate nation of our own, for God's sakes? See, that's where I'm coming from. I understand what you're saying. I think it's loving and utopian.
Have you ever heard of Paul Levi?
I want to end. I don't have any ideas, but it's 2:00.
Okay, I'm going to stop. Anyway, Paul Levi is wonderful. He's a Jewish American. He just states that, the problem with Israel is it's collective trauma. And the problem is it's trauma that was done in Europe in the 1900s. And it's now being...
What a lie. It's a trauma that goes back to Exodus.
Okay.
We have been driven out of every place we've ever been. We were driven out maybe 4 or 5 times. Exodus comes in multiple pieces. We were driven out by Muslims. We were driven out by the Roman Empire. No. And
okay.
I don't put much stock in.
Peter, you're on your deathbed. Before you die and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you give to your loved ones? That's my final question of the day. I ask everybody this.
Oh my God, I thought you were wishing me dead.
No, no, it's my signature question.
But I want to come back and say, I love you and I really respect what you're saying. I think it makes a lot of sense. My deepest difference is I think it's utopia.
Okay, I get that. So,
and that's really the difference that I see. And it certainly can be tracked back to my child.
Yeah, I think it does. So I think it all makes sense when you talk about your childhood, and that's where I talk about the trauma.
But don't use that to dismiss me.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Be careful about that.
No.
I don't know. I've been saying it all along. I'm saying it in my next book, and I've been saying it to Ginger and the people I love. It has to do with, live by love and respect for people. It's freedom. Recognize each other's freedom, respect each other, love each other, but be prepared to fight evil.
I agree with that. And I would say,
I'm going to end with this. This is my principles. I'll read you my principles that are they began in a book called Wow, I'm an American, and I've modified them because I put God in it. This is what I would say, I guess. Dare to trust in a loving God. Express gratitude for your gifts and opportunities. Take responsibility at all times. Stand firmly for freedom. Become a source of love. That's my principles.
Wonderful. Peter, thank you so much. I know you're running late. Thank you so much. Can you please thank Ginger? I love her so much. And she reached out to me after she read my piece about abortions, and she was very much moved by that.
She was deeply moved. We were going to open up our discussion with that today, but we went off talking about me. We wanted to introduce it with you've written. I haven't read it. Ginger said you've written the most amazing piece on abortion where you just look at everyone's feelings and it's sensitive and it's caring, and I presume it's not in favor of slaughtering babies.
Exactly okay. That. All right. God bless you. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts, and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations, and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence, and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.